Hey there neighbors, Kevin here with eTrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the CURT EZr double lock underbed gooseneck kit here on our 2022 Chevy Silverado 2500. So our neighbor came to us today because he owns a lawn care company and he needs to be able to haul some heavy duty equipment on a gooseneck trailer, and it's not really easy to do that without a gooseneck hitch in the bed of your Silverado. So the CURT EZr double lock gooseneck hitch was going to be the right option for him because it's a pretty simple install to get in there. CURT does a nice job of having all of the stuff kind of filtered down to just a few different brackets and makes it a little bit easier to get in here. Now, it's not your typical kind of gooseneck install compared to most, because a lot of the time you start out just cutting out your hole, whereas this one you start at the bottom and drill your way up and then start cutting through the bed. So it gives you a little bit more of a precise fit when it comes to actually getting that hole cut out for the gooseneck ball itself. So the difference maker with this one also is that it's going to have a double lock. So there's two pins, not just one pin going through here. So we know that we have two separate things that are help holding this in. So we have a lot more here for our brake strength. This hitch itself is going to have a 30,000 pound gross towing weight capacity, which is that weight pulling against it when you have your truck hook up to your trailer. And then it's going to have a 7,500 pound vertical load limit. So that's that pressure pushing down on the gooseneck ball itself, which is quite a bit higher than what your truck can handle. So you're probably going to be a little bit lower than that. You'll definitely want to double check your owner's manual and figure out exactly what your truck can actually handle so that you're not overloading it. Now, when it's time to pack it up, say you're done for the day, you can easily unlatch the ball and then flip it upside down. It's got a nice little handle, so that way you can drop it right in and be able to pick it right back up. Now, while it is in that stowed position, a nice thing about it is they give you a little cover, so you can just pop that in and keep any water from getting down in there and rusting your ball into place. Now, one thing we recommend on the regular is to make sure that you're greasing up the ball and the actual cylinder itself of it, so that way it doesn't get stuck inside of your gooseneck hitch. Now, all the protection in the world, even having a tonneau cover, there's still the opportunity of some kind of rain or sleet, anything like that that's on the ground, kicking up and getting up in your hitch, and that can rust the ball in place if you leave it in there for too long, no matter which hitch you have. So make sure that you take it out maybe every couple of weeks and just clean it off, re-grease it, drop it back into place, whether that's in the towing position or the stowed position, and you should be good for the life of the truck. Now, as far as the install goes, this is a gooseneck hitch, so it can be a bit trying at times because it is hard to get into all the little nooks and crannies here to get all of your hardware torqued down. Now, the other thing here is on the cross rails. So those big rectangle bars that are going to slide across the frame rails here, one of them is going to be 47 inches, the other one's going to be 47 1/4. You need to make sure that you're picking out the correct one because one of them is for the front and one of them is for the rear. If you mix those two up, your holes aren't going to line up and your hitch isn't going to, your center section and your outer frame brackets aren't going to line up and you won't be able to get it bolted down. So make sure that you save yourself some time and hassle at the beginning and separate each one of your pieces of hardware and all your brackets. Make sure you have them all labeled properly because the instructions aren't very clear. So it is really easy to start mixing up your parts because they kind of call a lot of the different brackets all just bracket, and they don't really give you a good definition, and the parts diagram really doesn't blow it up enough to make it easy to understand exactly which part you're talking about here. So give yourself a good prep before you go ahead and do this, and obviously don't wear a white shirt like I did today. I'm covered in all kinds of grease. Your frame rails, especially on a newer truck, are going to have a lot of grease on them, and it is a water-based one, I'm pretty sure, and it's just going to be all kind of over you if you start touching that. It just smears right off onto you. So wear some clothes you don't care about because you're going to get really dirty when you're under there. Now, if you feel like that's going to be too much for you or you just don't have all the tools, there is going to be a torque wrench needed for this because you are going to get pretty high up there, so you will need a higher rated torque wrench than most people are typically going to have. So a 1/2 inch drive is what you're looking for here. If you don't have one of those, please feel free to just use our dealer locator, and you can enter your zip code to find a shop near you and get it professionally installed, take all the hassle and worry out of it. If you are going to do this yourself, then stick around and I'll walk you through the process. Starting off our install, we're going to want to pull back the wheel well liners here. There's going to be some torque screws, so we got 3 right here. We've got two larger plastic nuts that are going to require a 1/2-inch socket. And then also there's this guy up here. It's more of a rounded nut because this just threads right onto a bolt. So we can drop this down. Now you can pull the whole liner out if you really want to. I'm gonna just kind of pull just enough hardware out so that we can peel this back and get access in here, but not so much that I have to pull the whole thing out, just because it can be a hassle trying to get these liners to line right back up and get all fastened back into place. Now in the instructions they also tell you to use a T25 bit, but I noticed that we were needing a T15 for all of the Torx bits that we do have here. So that might be just a trim package issue. Just make sure you have both on hand just in case yours differs. I'll start pulling these out. Took my bit with me. I'm gonna wait to pull any from the sides just yet because I'm gonna see how it kind of wants to curl back for me. But we can get our plastic nuts out of the way. And I'm sorry, I said a 1/2-inch. It's definitely 10 millimeter, not 1/2 inch. All right, so we're getting hung up here on that bolt from the top still. But what I think I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna take a strap and use one of our mounting holes to help hold it up, and I'm going to strap it up into the bed using one of the toe loops that are in there as well, and that'll give us enough room to work here, because really from the side we're just needing to get in really to the frame here. So we've got more than enough room to really work with without actually pulling the whole liner out. Now we're going to want to remove the bolt holding down our heat shield right here. There's going to be some more bolts under the vehicle as well we'll need to get to, but this is going to be the easiest way to get to this one right here. So even with the short well, a little bit too long to fit in here with our tool, so I did have to switch over to a ratcheting wrench. All right, so there's gonna be one more that you could get through the wheel well if you really wanted to. I got my wrench on it right now, sitting right here up on the frame. There's gonna be another one right here on this cross member, and then there's another one up at the front on that other cross member you can kind of see right there, sitting on top of that. And these all are going to still take that 13 millimeter socket or wrench depending on what you need to get into those tight spaces. So I'm going to get these last 3 bolts out and we can then remove our heat shield. Alright, with all 4 bolts out, we can now set this aside. Now the next step is going to be getting our braces in place, and there's a few things you want to do beforehand. So one of them is get your hardware ready. There's going to be 2 different size bolts when it comes to the 5/8. So you got a 1.5 and you got a 1 3/4. So make sure that you are paying attention to that because these do need to go in specific components here. Another thing that Curt recommends is take one of your bolts and run it through. What you're seeing right now dripping out of there is the frame rail grease, because I tried to test this already to see if it would flip or not, or if we're going to have to cut a little bit of the pinch weld. And we are going to be cutting the pinch weld, but one thing you can do is just thread in one of your bolts for both the 5/8 and these smaller ones here and just run them down. So I already did that with my ratchet, so I just ran them all the way down, ran them all the way back out, and that just helps clear out any kind of overspray, because when they're doing this they already have that hole tapped, so you don't want to have any kind of powder coating that's going to help or prevent you from being able to put your hardware in when you're sitting there struggling trying to fit everything in place. It's a lot easier to figure that out right now, clean out your threads, and then have it all ready to go once you are trying to get all that heavy equipment in place. Now the next thing here to take account of is the spacing. So you can see this is a little bit offset. This is facing over more towards this side right here. That is the side that we're going to need to face down. We want our bolt holes to be lower here, more close to the frame rail itself. So what we're going to do next is notch out a little spot for this to fit through, because if we look over at our wheel well, the liner for that pinch weld is just a little bit too much to allow this to actually fit. And what a lot of people like to do is they'll slide it in sideways and then flip it up. But a lot of the time there's just really not enough space unless you're going to sit there and crush the corrugated bottom of the bed. So instead of doing that, we'll just knock out just a little piece of the pinch weld, and this will slide right through with no problem. I'll give this a little mark just to kind of show where I want to trim out. Come back with our multi-tool and notch it out. And I'm just going to clean it off with my file real quick. I'm going to touch up the bare metal that we have here now. We'll let that dry for a minute before we slide in our braces. All right, now that we've given it a little bit of time to dry, we can slide in one of our sections here. I'm going to try and get under there a little bit too, just to kind of catch this, make sure it goes over onto the other frame rail. All right, now I've slid it forward since I'm being supported by both frame rails, get it a little bit out of the way so we can slide in our second one. So I'm pinching a bit on the first one we put in, and I can tell I'm not going to have enough room right now, so we're going to have to see exactly what we're binding up on. But it feels like it's more on the driver's frame rail side here. All right, so I came over on this side. I'm pinching just between the frame rail and the bed here, just a tiny bit, but it's enough. You give it a little bit of force, it just slides right through. So nothing actually hanging us up, just the sheer size and the spacing right here is it. But it's a snug fit and it's still working for us. All right, here's our center section. I have this oriented correctly. You're gonna have the gooseneck ball opening be closer towards the rear of the vehicle. And what we're gonna do right now is just put some tape over this just to help hold this little trim ring down. This is gonna help protect our hitch opening, so that way when we're drilling through, we're not gonna be cutting this up too much here, because we wanna make sure that this is staying nice and clean. And then also, this is going to be how we determine where to drill through. So we'll be drilling up through the bottom of this with a 3/16 drill bit, and that's going to go right up through the bed. And then when we get to the top of the bed, we now have a pilot hole, so that way we can drill down with our 4-inch hole saw and get this exactly where we need it to be. All right, now that I have my center section, making sure that we have it in the correct orientation, I'm going to slide it up over our exhaust. So next, to connect our center section up to our cross arms, we're going to have a conical tooth washer. And with those teeth facing down towards the end where we're going to be threading in here. And then our 1/2-inch hardware. We've got our holes. We'll just need to line up along with our cross arms so that we can bolt that into place. And this is only going to fit one way because we have the center 4 with that 1/2-inch, and then the outer ones are going to be that 5/8. So you can't mess this up because it's only going to fit in there one way. Now while we're doing this, we're going to go with the bolt head on the inside and the threads facing out, and then that's what's going to thread into those cross arms. So I'm going to kind of wiggle this around, get it oriented right, and then start popping in the 4 bolts on the back here. And I'm going to throw one in the front too, just to help hold it up, and then we can kind of get it all tightened down. If you're having issues getting your bolts into the cross arms from that center section, just to give yourself a little bit more room, you can loosen the body mount bolts. So on ours, we've got one right back here, and then across, and then another one right up at the end of the bed, right where the cab actually begins. So you're going to need, obviously, some extensions and some swivel fittings to get to these, just because there's a lot of other stuff in the way. And we don't want to fully take them out. We're just loosening it just a little bit because we don't want to throw off how our bed's going to be sitting here. But that'll give us a little bit more wiggle room, especially because right now I do have all of my bolts in, but I kind of pinched myself doing that because I pushed it forward to give myself a little bit more room to work, and now I can't get it to come back. So I'm going to have to loosen up this other bed bolt, and then I'm going to see that if that's going to be enough to actually yank the whole assembly back to where we need it to fit. Because the next step is going to be our side brackets, and on those side brackets there's a hole in it. These are side specific too. There's a hole right here that's going to match up with the hole that's in our frame rail. So like I said, I need to kind of shift this around, but I'm just pinched between the frame rail and the bottom of the bed right now. So loosening it up should give us enough room to slide it back and get everything oriented correctly. All right, so now we're back over on the passenger side, and I have the correct bracket for our passenger side. You can see this oblong hole right here in the frame rail. That's exactly what is going to line up once we have that bracket in place. Now mine's a bit tighter. I did tighten down my bolts a lot more than they say to, because they say to leave it loose for the cross arms. But I just needed it to be that way so that I could get the other ones in place. So this is going to line right up. I took a measure between the hat channel and then the cross arm going towards the tailgate, and I got about 1 5/8. So if you have the short bed, the 6 3/4, you should probably have a hat channel in that same vicinity, and can kind of measure over, just make sure that you're even on both sides. And then you can also hold up the brackets and make sure, because now we can see, hey, I got that hole right there and it's fitting right through. So we can drop this back down. And then we're going to reverse fish wire in our carriage bolt. And to do so, we're also going to need to actually grind out just a small chunk here, because as you can see, our carriage bolt isn't fitting through that hole. Really, if you just take a grinding bit and just get maybe a 1/16 of an inch off at that top right there, you'd be good to go though. So to reverse fish wire, we're going to first thread in our bolt. Once you have that wound into the threads, you can also pop on your spacer block. And we're going to put the head of the bolt in first. I probably could have shaved just a bit more. There we go. And we'll slide in our spacer block, and then when we go to pull it out, it'll come out just like so, and be able to throw on the nut with our bracket here. So I'm going to slide this bracket into place. I'm going to push my bolt back into the frame, and we'll put our fish wire through the hole. Get our bracket all set up. Bring it down here first. And then one thing you can do is either use a small flathead screwdriver or just use your fingernail to pinch into the threads of the bolt. That'll help hold it, keep it from falling back in while you get the nut on. So once you get a couple threads, it's safe to kind of get your finger out of the way. There we go. Next, we're going to take our 1/2-inch U-bolt. That's one of these guys right here, and that's going to go over our frame. And we also want to grab 2 of our 1/2-inch flange nuts. Now, on our bracket, we're going for the rearmost hole here, so that's the one closest to our tailgate. And we're going to line our U-bolt up, get that through, and then we can throw on those flange nuts. Anytime you're tightening down a U-bolt, make sure that you're doing it evenly between the 2 nuts. Otherwise, you can have it sit crooked, and then it's not really getting that full tightness that it needs. And then if you ever had some kind of bump in the road or something that shook it loose, then now it's really going to be loose because it wasn't tightened down evenly. All right, now on this outer plate here, we're also going to be using those 1.5-inch 5/8 bolts. I've already got this one in. Now, if you tighten down any of the ones in the cross section to this rear cross arm, you're going to need to loosen them up a bit, because this is going to fight this bolt right here. I already kind of had it in, and then I went back and tightened up a few of those inside just to kind of even everything out and make sure that our plate is sitting exactly where it needs to. But I'm going to pop this other one in. And then we're going to repeat the same process over on the other side. So that's going to be the fish wire and bolt, the U-bolt and the 2 flange nuts, and then our 2 5/8 bolts along with a flat washer into our cross arms. Now on the inside of our frame rail, so we have that other bracket on the outside. This one's going to be the inside in between the frame rail and then our center section. There's going to be 2 more holes, one on either cross arm, and this is going to sit right up in there, and we're going to pop in another one of our 1.5 inch 5/8 bolts along with a flat washer. And that's going to go on both sides and lock it into place on the inside of our frame rail. And this is going to be on both the passenger and driver's side. Now it's a little bit harder to show on camera just because there's a lot in the way right here, and also I'm going to need to kind of block the way just so that I can get up in there enough to get this in place. But here, Tom, if you want to come over here, you can see the two spots I'm talking about. So here's our bolt hole, and right in here is where our bracket is going to sit. So I can maybe get myself in here. All right, that one's starting to thread in. Now that we have all of our hardware in place and all of our brackets in there, we are going to start torquing things down. Now what we're going to want to start with are the bolts. So our U-bolts and our 5/8 bolt that are attaching our side bracket to our frame rail. We'll get all of the ones done on this side and that side over on the driver's side there. And then we'll come back and we can do the side plates that are on the inside. So those other like U-shaped brackets that are just on the other side of our frame rail here. And then from there we can start tightening up the cross arm brackets to our center section. Once you have everything torqued down, we're going to come back with a 3/16 drill bit, and we're going to get it right in the center of that little plastic trim piece that we stuck in the top here. So now I'm finally hitting it, and we're going to drill up through our bed with that 3/16 drill bit. All right, now for our safety chain loops, I'm going to be using my center punch to get the center here. And I'm going to do that in each one of these holes because we've got 2 on each side for those safety chain loops to drop down. And then we will drill that out. And I'm going to switch over to my right angle drill just because this is a much tighter area to try and drill through. But I'm still going to go ahead and use that 3/16 drill bit. We're going to work our way up to a 5/8 once we are ready. Now we're going to be using a 4-inch hole saw with a 3/16 drill bit. That way we can put it right through that pilot hole we already drilled so that we have this exactly lined up. Now be careful with this. Once we get past the metal, it's going to be really easy to damage your hitch. That plastic center finder that we stuck in there will help protect it, but if you sit there and just chew it all out, it's not going to last for very long. So make sure that once you get most of the way through the bed, that you're starting to kind of slow it down and really take your time with it. I also find it helpful. Sometimes it'll grab onto the bed. Put your leg right there to stop your drill because it's going to want to kick out on you. Now that we have our hole cut, we're going to come back with a file and just clean up our edges here, and then a white or clear paint marker just so that you can cover up all that exposed metal. Now we have our center section hole cut out. We're going to next do our safety chain loops. I've already done this side just so you can see what it's going to look like once we're done. We'll be able to drop our safety chain loop right on in. And then on the bottom we're going to have 2 flat washers and a spring between them with a nut holding it all together. And that's going to make it so that we can have it pop up, but then when we don't need it, the spring's going to want to pull it right back down. All right, so same concept here, except for this time I'm just going to use a step bit. Makes it a little bit easier to get us down to that 5/8. You could also just use a 5/8 drill bit, but I like going a little bit slower and using this to where I can walk it to exactly what I need, and then I'll file it down. your kit, there's also going to be a decorative trim ring that's going to have 3 screws. Then it's going to require an Allen key to tighten down. And I'm just throwing that on real quick before we go down because it's one less step we got to do. Now, I've also been doing that so I can let my paint dry on my safety chain loop holes. So I'm going to drop those in, and we'll bring our hardware down to the bottom so that way we can get these with the springs and the flat washers that we have here. All right, we're going to slide on a flat washer. Then our spring, we'll compress that a bit, hit it with another flat washer. Once we get that out of the way enough, then we'll have a nylock nut. Then we'll just repeat that on all of the rest of our U-bolts. Once you have each one on, just tighten it down until the end of the bolt is flush with the end of our nut. Now we're going to be passing our handle through this larger hole here on the side. We're in our driver's side wheel well, and I've already poked a hole through that. Let's get that to line up, and then we're going to bring this in through. There's another thing we got to pass through, which we'll need to get under the vehicle to see again, but we'll have some more hardware that we're going to fix into the center of our hitch here. On the center section here, we had another hole to pass through. Once we come in further. Now, when we look at the double lock portion here that actually goes through and locks our ball end, there's going to be an open side and a closed side. We want that open side up because that is what our rod is going to go through, our latch, and we're going to slide on a flat washer, another one of our springs, and then another flat washer before we lock it in here with the final bolt and nut. All right, so what we're going to do here to make this easier is we are going to slot in our locking pins, and then we are going to run that up and then force our handle in place. Now that our latch is in place, the only thing left to do is just reinstall your heat shield and your fender liners. Now the heat shield, not going to be able to go up exactly how you had it before. There will be one section of it you'll want to just bend down, and that is going to be this tab right here on the frame rail because our gooseneck hitch is in the way. What you can do is you can still get this up on there, but you'll want to just kind of bend that down because this is going to sit along the cross member that's going across and this cross member here, and then that frame rail at the back right near our spare tire. So as long as you just bend that one section that goes right up here on the frame rail where our gooseneck hitch is sitting, you'll be good to go. But with all that said, the last part of this is just simply dropping in your gooseneck hitch ball, and then you're ready to tow. Well, that's going to do it for our look at and installation of the CURT EZr double lock underbed gooseneck kit here on our 2022 Chevy Silverado 2500. My name's Kevin, and if you still have some questions about what's going to be the right underbed gooseneck kit for your Silverado, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.